That night, the chandeliers of the grand ballroom glittered like frozen stars, and everyone seemed dressed in money and power. It was supposed to be one of those moments you remember with pride. Me walking hand in hand with my wife into the company's annual gala. But the truth, it felt like walking into an arena where I was the entertainment. The first crack appeared when I caught the way she looked at him, her boss. That sly little grin she thought I didn't notice. The kind of grin reserved for secrets lovers share. I brushed it off at first, told myself I was imagining it. But then came the laughter. Not the usual polite, mingling kind of laugh. This was sharp, mocking. I turned my head just in time to see her and her boss whispering to each other, eyes flicking toward me before erupting in smug little chuckles. I felt heat crawl up my neck, the kind of humiliation that burns deeper than anger. I stood there, glass in hand, wondering how I had become the joke in a room full of people I barely knew. The sting wasn't just in the betrayal, it was in the performance. My wife, the woman I trusted, using me as the punchline in front of her powerful colleagues. But humiliation has a funny way of sharpening the mind. And in that moment, a quiet thought formed. A single idea that kept me from walking out. If they wanted a show, fine. I'd give them one. And I knew exactly who I needed to talk to. The CEO himself. I forced a smile, the kind you wear when you're bleeding inside but don't want the crowd to smell it. Every laugh they shared cut deeper, and my wife didn't even try to hide it anymore. Her hand rested on her boss's arm, just a second too long, her body leaning toward him instead of me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theater. She was using this gala as her stage, turning me into the fool. But the thing about people who laugh too loudly is they forget who's really in control of the room. That's when I spotted him, the CEO, silver hair, posture carved from steel, the kind of man who didn't waste words but commanded entire rooms with a glance. He was shaking hands, moving slowly from group to group like a king surveying his court. And that's when the thought solidified. My wife thought she was untouchable here. She thought her boss's shadow was protection. But the boss wasn't the king of this castle. The CEO was. And all it would take was one whisper in the right ear to flip the entire night upside down. I set my glass down, smoothed my jacket, and started walking. Every step felt like fire running through my veins, not from anger, but anticipation. Because in just a few moments, the smirks that had haunted me all night would vanish. And the stage they built to humiliate me, I was about to burn it down. The laughter behind me grew louder as I approached the CEO. My wife's voice carried through the ballroom, high-pitched and sweet, like she was auditioning to be the evening's entertainment. She didn't even notice I had stepped away, too busy basking in the attention of her boss and his entourage. The CEO turned just as I reached him. His eyes narrowed slightly, scanning me the way a hawk studies a mouse, calculating whether I was worth his time. "Evening," I said, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I know you don't waste time on gossip, but what I have will save you millions." That got his attention. His hand froze halfway to his glass. I leaned in, whispering just enough to slip the truth between us. About my wife, about her boss, and the little side deals they thought were invisible. I painted it clean, sharp, with names and details no one outside their circle should know. The CEO didn't flinch, didn't blink, but I saw it, the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth. The kind of look a man gives when he realizes the game just changed and he's the only one holding the cards. By the time I stepped back, his eyes had already locked on my wife's boss across the room. The laugh still hanging in the air suddenly felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. My wife leaned in toward her boss again, smiling smug, completely unaware that the ground beneath her feet had already started to crack. And in that moment I knew. One whisper was all it took. The CEO excused himself from the small circle he was standing with, his movements calm but deliberate. like a judge rising from the bench. He didn't announce anything. He didn't need to. His eyes cut straight through the crowd until they landed on my wife and her boss. The room seemed to tilt in their direction. The laughter that had once been so loud stumbled into silence, replaced by an almost tangible unease. My wife's boss straightened, trying to mask his sudden discomfort with a forced smile. But the CEO wasn't smiling. His voice, when it finally broke the air, was steady enough to freeze the entire ballroom. "Step into my office, now." It wasn't a request. It wasn't even anger. It was something colder. Final. The boss paled, stammering something about a misunderstanding. My wife glanced between the two men, her smile faltering for the first time all night. I could see the panic flooding in, the recognition that the stage she'd been performing on had just collapsed under her heels. She looked toward me then, her face twisted with something between fury and desperation. But I didn't move. I didn't need to. The CEO turned without another word and walked toward the back. Her boss followed in silence, and my wife in her shimmering dress stood frozen in the center of the room, every pair of eyes locked on her. The smirks were gone, every single one. The back doors of the ballroom swung open again. The CEO walked out alone, his expression unreadable. A hush rippled across the room, every guest holding their breath. Then he stopped, turned toward the crowd, and spoke loud enough for every single ear to catch it. "As of tonight, your boss is no longer employed here. His conduct does not represent this company or myself. And as for—" He paused, letting the silence stretch, his eyes locking on my wife like a spotlight. "The company he kept, well, I think she's already exposed herself enough." The audience didn't gasp. They didn't need to. The weight of his words settled heavier than any outburst could have. My wife's face turned scarlet. Her dress, her makeup, her carefully rehearsed elegance, it all became a costume shredded under the gaze of 100 people. She reached for her wine glass with a trembling hand, but even that betrayed her. The glass slipped, shattering on the marble floor. Not a soul moved to help her. I didn't speak. I didn't smirk. I didn't need to. The one whisper I'd given the CEO had spoken louder than any revenge plot ever could. She was left standing there alone, humiliated, exposed, and stripped of everything she thought she could weaponize against me. The gala moved on without her, and I walked out with my head high, leaving her drowning in the ruins of her own making. The night air outside the gala felt different, crisp, clean, free. I lit a cigar I'd been saving for a moment just like this, each pull tasting sweeter than the last. Behind me, through the glass walls, I could see her, my wife, still trapped in the wreckage of her own pride. Guests avoided her like she carried a plague. Her once perfect smile was gone, replaced with desperation. She glanced toward the exit more than once, but every time she moved, whispers followed. She was too proud to walk out, too broken to stay. I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered every snide comment, every hidden text message I'd found. Every night she came home late smelling of someone else's cologne. She had laughed at me with her boss in front of everyone tonight, certain she held all the power. Now, she was powerless. And me? I had options. The CEO had pulled me aside after the announcement. He offered me a seat at his table, new contracts, new opportunities, doors my wife never thought I could touch. That whisper hadn't just ended her little game. It had upgraded my entire life. The betrayal had forged me into someone stronger, someone sharper, someone she would never recognize again. As I walked away into the city lights, I didn't see a man abandoned by his wife. I saw a man who had just been reborn. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that night never left. I had stepped into a new world, one built on respect and opportunity. The CEO kept his promise. My name started appearing on contracts, projects, and meetings my wife never thought I was capable of handling. I wasn't just climbing, I was soaring, and that's when she came crawling back. It started with texts. "We need to talk. I made a mistake. Please, just hear me out." I ignored them at first. Silence was a louder answer than any words I could send. But then she showed up, outside my office, looking nothing like the smug woman who once laughed at me. Her hair disheveled, her eyes swollen from tears. She begged, pleaded, swore her boss had meant nothing, that it was just a mistake. I let her speak, let her drown in her excuses. And when she finally stopped, waiting for me to save her from the wreckage she created, I leaned in and whispered the same line I told her boss that night at the gala. "You don't realize who you're standing in front of." Because I wasn't her husband anymore. I wasn't her fool. I wasn't her safety net. I was the man who turned her betrayal into my breakthrough. And now, she was just a footnote in the story of my rise. When the gala ended, I walked out, not as the man humiliated by his cheating wife, but as the man who now had the CEO's backing in his pocket. The whispers spread like wildfire. Board members, investors, and staff already knew something had shifted. By the next week, her boss was suspended pending internal investigations. And my wife. She went from strutting around like she owned the night to watching her entire world unravel in broad daylight. Her credit cards were cut, her access frozen, and the same circles that once cheered her now avoided her like a curse. One whisper from me had flipped her empire upside down. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. She had laughed at me in public, but her downfall would be remembered long after that night. And when she came crawling back, begging me to help her salvage the life she destroyed, I only leaned in and whispered the same way I did to the CEO that night. "You made your choice. Now live with it." That was the last time she smirked at me.